You're listening to the Lou Stokes podcast, real and inspiring conversations with individuals from all over the world, sharing their insights on sustainability, fashion, conscious consumerism, and empowerment. Be inspired to take action and be the change you want to see in the world. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Lou Stokes podcast. On this episode, I'm very lucky to have Katia Dayan Vladimirova with me on the show. Welcome, Katia.
Hi, Lou. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. I'm really excited to delve into this conversation with you. So why don't you just give us a bit of a background about yourself and your journey in this fascinating world of sustainable fashion?
Thanks. Yeah, well, I am based at the University of Geneva, where I teach sustainable development and I do research on sustainable fashion consumption. It builds on my double PhD, which I defended 10 years ago. I'm an ethicist by training, political philosopher, and political scientist. So I've always worked on values and sustainability in kind of at a meta level. And about 7 years ago, I decided to focus on fashion consumption research as a more applied field, and I haven't regretted since. I'm happy to share my research journey and some key findings today.
Thank you. It's amazing. What made you decide on the fashion consumption research? Was there something in particular, or it was just a great interest of yours?
Well, so I've been moving around a lot since I started my master's degree. I lived in 6 different countries over the past 16 years and 8 cities. And it really, it meant a lot of moving around. And wherever I went, I shopped. I loved buying clothes and trying out different outfits. So fashion has always been, I think we're all on the same wavelength here. And, it's always been this important pastime, hobby for me, which I enjoyed. And so for several years while I was writing my PhD, I was working on sustainability values, on ethics of sustainability, and how, why, knowing all we know about climate change, are we not acting fast enough or in a proportionate manner. And imagine I was writing all this while shopping at fast fashion retailers. And granted, I mean, it was before Rana Plaza when I was writing this, and not that much information was available 15 years ago on these issues than it is today. But I remember distinctly just blocking out any information that had to do with unethical labor conditions or anything else, environmental pollution. I'm like, no, this is my pastime. Just leave this to me. I can't, don't. So this treasure hunt and thrill of finding the best deals, that's what I really enjoyed. And then after I finished my PhD, I had a baby. I find this is what we see in research as well. Many women experience this kind of changed phase of life, and your values somewhat shift because you refocus towards a new human being in your life, and in terms of many things. And that's when I realized that I would like to apply the knowledge that I did at a meta level about education for sustainable development, about values for sustainable development, but something more tangible. And there was one article that triggered my attention from EcoWatch that spoke about the importance of fashion. And I was like, no way. And then I decided to educate myself. And it was 2016. And I watched the True Cost documentary, and that completely shifted for many, many, many people. I was among many people whose life has been changed because of that documentary. I realized that after watching it, and in my personal life, I could no longer shop in fast fashion retailers. I just couldn't. For myself, I honestly, I didn't buy, so it's been 8 years. I couldn't buy anything from a fast fashion retailer, just knowing everything I know. But I started digging deeper and realizing that I could really contribute to research on consumption side, because this is where we have this moral conundrum, of women, why, knowing all we know, about the impacts of fast fashion, of unsustainable fashion consumption. Why do we still shop? So the conundrum remains still there. It's still there. But I thought I started working on it, and I received some condescending attitude from some of my male colleagues at the university, not here in Geneva, but it was across my other universities where I was based. And it would be like, well, things will pick up for you. Like, treating fashion as not as an important inquiry enough in the academic context. But I continued, and I got some funding, one in Milan Bicocca University. Then I moved to Geneva. And there is some support for this kind of research. So for me, fashion has been it's a very applied area of research, but I'm really using all the past background that I have from ethics and from political science to apply to understand kind of systemic issues that are happening through the lens
Right.
of consumption.
Amazing. And as far as, let's talk about the consumer, because often the consumer doesn't have the information, right? I feel like as a consumer, we have to search for this information. And a lot of people talk about, how, and I myself talk about how we need to be more conscious consumers and etc. But it does actually mean a shift in mindset for us, because we are brainwashed and manipulated by marketing, obviously, and by brands, unfortunately. But at the same time, it's like we can actually try to dig deeper and look. But I think often, people don't have time. I don't think it's that they don't want to, but they don't necessarily have time to do all this. And I think there is a disconnect between our clothes and what really goes on behind the scenes, let's say. Like, a lot of people aren't really thinking about how their clothes were made, or who made them, or what chemicals were used. I think people just walk into a store and buy. I know I did back then. I didn't think about who was making my clothes. That didn't even really enter my sphere of thoughts. So when it comes to brands, like, do you feel like they should be the ones taking the lead with educating and helping consumers understand? Or is it
There's so much to unpack here, because I am basing my current studies of the fashion consumption domain on research that comes from other consumption domains that have been studied much more. Since I think in 2006, there was this very important article that came out that defined 3 consumption domains as the most environmentally important polluting ones: mobility, food, and energy, household energy consumption. And a lot of effort has been spent on studying those 3 domains of consumption, of household consumption. Like, how do we move around? How do we eat? How does this impact, carbon emissions, but also deforestation, etc.? And there is a wealth of information, not only on the systemic, aspects of these domains, but also on interventions. So specific interventions have been developed to change people's diets through schools, and people's mobility, and reduce demand for energy, for heating or cooling homes, etc. So there's a wealth of research that's already out there when we look at changing people's behavior. But when we look at textiles and clothes and fashion, it's a relatively new field of consumption research. And I feel that despite everything that's been done in those other research fields, we are starting again with the same kind of assumptions that started the other 3 research areas 20 years ago, which is consumers need more information. Consumers need to be guided towards something, otherwise they don't know. It's consumers' job to vote, not a job, but it's consumers' responsibility to vote with their dollar, and this is the way they're going to change the system. So for me, all of these assumptions are actually, they've been proven to have very, very limited validity. They are valid in very specific contexts, but overall they're not really valid. And especially there was this important paper that talked about consumer scapegoating and assigning responsibility for change, from 2014, in which the author, Louis Akanji, he talks about how we tend to say that it's consumers' responsibility to do something in order to change the system. It is not. It is too much to expect from a consumer who has little time, like you have mentioned, little knowledge and time to acquire this knowledge. If we take to educate herself, or not even to kind of inform her choices in certain things. But even going beyond that, we can look at consumer behavior in a kind of a standard rational choice theory approach, in which we think, okay, if consumer has enough information, if there is a label that tells you what is sustainable, more or less, you're going to go for a more sustainable option. That is not what's happening, really. Consumers have this label fatigue. Not even get me started on labeling fashion, because it's really becoming almost impossible. It's a complex product. But there are hundreds of labels. Consumers can't catch up on different meanings, and fair trade and organic, and all of these, just to figure out like what means what, which label is credible, which one is not. It's really difficult. So this is really a lot to expect from consumers, this knowledge side. But I also personally, I really like a theoretical approach that looks beyond this kind of consumption and rational choice, which sees it in more complexity, our behavior in more complexity. It's not that if we have the information, we're going to make the right choice. The social practice approach tells us that consumers not just behave in a certain way. Consumers are involved in certain routinized patterns of behavior, which are called social practices. Social practice could be how you go grocery shopping on a Sunday or a Saturday to your local supermarket or to a farmer's market. Social practice is how you engage with your community at a local general assembly once a year. And, sort of, when it comes to consumption, a lot of our consumption behavior are part of social practices. And in social practice, our actions are determined by three elements. The first one is skills. So do you actually have skills to do something or make something? The skills could be, driving a car to go to the supermarket, or the skill could be being able to fix your clothes to keep it in use longer. The second one is norms and attitudes, so what the society thinks about your behavior. And in terms of fast fashion, the norms are still, those norms and attitudes that I can't post an outfit more than once on Instagram. This is an attitude towards, fast fashion that's been really detrimental. Or that at work, women are expected to show up in new garments in new outfit every day. This kind of norm. And finally, there is infrastructure. And this is really a critical element that most rational choice kind of ignores. If you don't have good infrastructure that allows you to engage in certain choices, you can't. So when we speak about fast fashion, for example, and buying sustainably or responsibly or not, I've done this study at the City of Geneva, and we see that it is really difficult for a consumer who is not very much informed and already convinced to engage in more sustainable practices, because the choices that are available, the infrastructure that is available to her, downtown shops, the most convenient ones, the high street shops, are fast fashion shops. Oxford Street, Fifth Avenue, you can't find a second-hand shop there. Rents are too high, right?
Maybe that you read my mind.
So how can we ask consumers to engage in a more sustainable pattern of behavior if the infrastructure is not there, if the skills are not taught at schools anymore? There's really a complex view of social change that we can take, and I think it's more informative than just limiting it to the behavior of a consumer is informed by the information that they're provided. To me it's much broader. I'm sorry, I get carried away with this.
Absolutely, it's totally so true. I'd never thought about, the infrastructure and the high street and like the convenience, because a lot of people don't have a lot of time, do they? So they do go for convenience. And if that's what they're, then that's what they're going to do. So it's like there's
And
this
yeah.
system.
And
Um,
how can you blame, for example, a consumer for it? Sometimes like, yeah, but they should spend time on learning more. A mom of three, a single mom who works, how can you expect, and why?
yeah,
Like, what kind of right do we have to expect? People have different situations, people have different levels of exposure to these topics. And to me, really, if we're speaking, like you mentioned, whether brands should take responsibility, should slave owners have taken responsibility for abandoning slavery? Some did, yes, but not all of them. Most of them decided not to. To me, really, the driving force here are neither consumers nor brands. It's the state. It's
the
the
government. Yeah,
responsibility of the government to ensure that there is regulation that is powerful enough to control this, you know, crazy overproduction on the side of producers that doesn't take anything into account other than the profits of very few people at the top, but also overconsumption, in which consumers are so affected by marketing, are so affected by this culture in which we don't see, we're protected, kind of, we have this like falls, like the horse is out and run.
yeah,
the, we,
yeah.
we don't see what's happening upstream. We don't see the supply chain, the pollution, the suffering of people. We don't see, the sweatshops. So the clothes just arrives new and shiny and pretty, but we don't see what happens at the end of life, neither. So the textile, open textile landfills in mostly in Africa, in Asia, in South America, where people are just confronted with those mountains of synthetic non-biodegradable waste that we don't want,
Yeah.
having worn once, sometimes with price tags still attached. And so consumers also have to be regulated in a certain, we need to realize that the fact that we don't see this doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. There is no a way, there is no, it's not robots making our clothes, it's actual people involved at every stage of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting because like social media and internet, obviously, you know, there's like this duality of like there's these influencers that are doing the shopping hauls and working with brands that are ultra fast fashion and things like that. And then the other side of it, you've got influencers or inspirers or whatever we want to call them, trying to inform people about fast fashion and sustainable fashion. So I don't know in your research, Katia, whether you've seen how social media is really affecting the consumer
Yeah.
in both.
Thanks for asking. Yeah, it's really an important part of my research. I actually believe that social media is perhaps today one of the most valuable sources of information for researchers, because that's e-commerce and social commerce is where most of the transactions are happening, most of the consumption is happening. So I've published several articles based on social media research, including a recent one I co-authored with 8 other colleagues from the International Research Network on Sustainable Fashion Consumption. And we analyze what's the current status of research on the impacts of social media, the influences of social media on sustainable fashion consumption. And what we found is a whole bunch of studies that look at essentially how brands can communicate their sustainability efforts better, in order, whether they have actual sustainability efforts or not, but basically how do brands reach sustainably minded consumers, which is about selling more stuff, which to me is counter, even intuitive when you speak about sustainability. To me, sustainability will always be about sufficiency and reducing and limiting and putting caps to live within planetary boundaries. But there is this whole other group which is much less researched, but it's very vocal, and it receives much more engagement actually from social media users. These are those, let's say, sustainable fashion influencers who talk about all sorts of, alternative ways of consuming, of repairing, of buying more responsibly, but also swapping, buying secondhand, renting garments, reimagining, upcycling. There's a lot of creativity in that area that is just blossoming. But we do see that the whole discourse on sustainable fashion on social media has been, how do you say, there's been a corporate capture of this, and for that I have a proof. Another article that I wrote, this time by myself. It was called "Behind 11 Million Likes," who talks about sustainable fashion on Instagram. And in that article, I analyzed 500 like the most popular posts over a period of time, in terms of likes, in terms of engagement. And it turns out that the loudest voices that talk about sustainable fashion on Instagram are H&M, especially influencers paid by H&M to talk about their fashion, tagging it as sustainable fashion, and Reliance Polyester, the largest polyester and synthetic fiber producer in India. Which these posts that are quite superficial actually in their content. They just have beautiful visuals, very superficial, descriptions, not going in depth whatsoever, but
Yeah.
tagging and kind of riding the wave of sustainable fashion discourse. So these ones were the most liked. However, if you look at the posts that were the most commented on, and this is a different, you see there's this difference and nuance. If a social media user likes a post, it's called the kind of a superficial engagement. But if a person chooses to comment on a posts that are not like competition where you have to tag someone, but like
Yeah.
make an actual comment, that's a deeper social media engagement level. And the ones that are most commented are posts that come from sustainable fashion influencers that are actually talking against overconsumption. They uncover some amazing, topics. Aja Barber, she talks about like really cross-cutting topics of systemic racism, exploitation, but also environmental pollution, and really like very interesting take on consumption issues. So people can go quite a lot into philosophy, but also often these influencers, their attractiveness is because they offer step-by-step guidance. Like, okay, I've been over consuming. I realize it now. How do I go about it? Give me step-by-step. Everybody loves checklists, and step-by-step guidance. And they do provide, many do provide these,
Yeah.
sharing their experience in a kind of in a way that you can relate to.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah.
where the power is, of the social media. That's where many people today actually go. Like the young people don't go to their grandmother to ask for advice; they go to social media
Yeah.
to ask, like, how do I remove a stain from my blouse? Google it, or how do I store my pickles in winter? You just go
Yeah,
check on.
absolutely. It's like you don't Google it anymore. You actually go to Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah, just see the
Right.
video. That's the easiest. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your studies, was there a mindset shift with COVID? Have you seen that? Because we were all locked in our homes, and so people had space and time maybe to even consider all the stuff they have in their homes, particularly in their wardrobe.
Hmm.
Was that a
Yeah.
clear picture that consumption went down, or not
Well,
really?
clothes was a particular category of goods. So as soon as it became clear during this COVID madness that you could still ship things, shipping and buying online continued. We couldn't buy things in physical stores, but shipping and online purchases have really, e-commerce has taken off during that period. We did a large comparative study among 9 countries with colleagues from the network, and we did find some interesting, patterns of consumption change during lockdowns. Lots of people found exactly they had to be confronted with their wardrobes. They had time, not parents with children usually, but some students filled out our surveys across different countries, and they reported that they found time to declutter. They made time to really reconnect with their garments, to repair some things. There was a whole boom in upcycling and creativity, restyling dresses in Scandinavian countries, for example. There have been reports of people making time to educate themselves a bit better. Some people wrote that I had time to look up what those impacts were. Others reported that they went to search for local secondhand shops, and as soon as COVID ended, they actually went and shopped in those secondhand shops. So it's about providing time to people to do things that they may have not had time to do before. But it also kind of coincided with the fact that ultra fast fashion brands that entirely are based in e-commerce took off around that very time. So Boohoo, Pretty Little Things, and of course the Shein giant that exists today, they're rooted in that period when people shifted to online, buying things online. I do see in the research shows us, I do see multiple trends that are simultaneously kind of taking off. Of course, when we speak about volumes of Shein, that is a dominant trend. But we do see since a while that people are quite interested. The people are stuffed. People had enough. And people want to have less as well. So when we talk about ultra fast fashion, it's usually younger people who still are experimenting with their identity. They don't have usually the budget to spend on higher price tags and so on. But when we're speaking about women, especially 30, 35 plus, many report that their wardrobes have filled up by then. And at that point, the same overconsumption patterns and frenzy, it doesn't bring them joy anymore because, well, you don't have space to put stuff in. Wardrobes are limited.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you get to the point where you actually don't want it. You just kind of get like really annoyed and frustrated with your wardrobe because you can't find anything. You don't really know what you have, and everything like is jammed in there unless you've got a huge house and a walk-in wardrobe.
Yeah, who does?
Yeah, I mean, and so I found that I was like, oh, I have all this stuff, and like also stuff that wasn't even of good quality, that potentially was itching my skin, or just something that I was like, why did I even buy that? The typical thing, oh, there's 70% off or 50% off, I'll just get it, it's nice, and you don't really think about it, and then you're like, actually I wore that twice or didn't even wear it. So I think it's a really interesting exercise to do as like a consumer, is to really look at what you have and like why you reflect on why you bought it.
Yeah, totally.
To help you then kind of change your mindset and your patterns towards consuming.
I did several studies on minimalism and looking at how voluntary simplicity and living with less in a voluntary manner in which you consciously choose to be more mindful. So I've done several projects around this, and it seems that reported benefits are very strong. It seems that living with less really contributes positively to our well-being. I've also experienced this myself. It was my personal story, that downsizing after I've watched the True Cost documentary, I went through several rounds of Marie Kondo clearing out my house and my wardrobe. that really creates more positive feelings of happiness, subjective well-being. Um, and actually, we do have some research around this related to clothing, but we're preparing a bigger research project now with three other colleagues from Texas State University in the States, Technische Universität Berlin, and Hong Kong University of Applied Sciences and University of Geneva. So it's going to start in January, and the idea is actually to invite people who already, it's not that they're 100% convinced, but they've already started thinking that's something we need to change the relationship with our clothes. In order to reflect, to take them on a journey when there's every month there is a challenge, which is like a piece of information that you kind of could work around, implementing new practices in your life, in order to see whether really being more mindful about your consumption, about what you have, reconnecting with your garments, whether this has impacts on your well-being. Because if it does, if a bigger study can figure something out, whether there's actually a bigger pattern and not just anecdotal evidence, this could be huge for policy. This could be the convincing argument that could help push the policy in the right direction. Because for many years, this idea of overconsumption and buying more just to, consumption being associated with status, consumption being associated with wealth and success, it has created those stereotypes also among policymakers that for some reason equate increased consumption and overconsumption, buying more, with being better or feeling better. But I feel that with fashion, at least these studies that we see already, they do indicate that the opposite relationship, that less is better, that creativity is more enhanced under constraints. There's this beautiful 10 by 10 challenge by Style Bee from Canada, in which the participants are encouraged to use 10 garments and shoes and accessories over 10 days. And people who went through this challenge report the most amazing, one of the best benefits is creativity, that I didn't know that I could even combine it this way, these garments, but I did because I only could use those 10, and I really loved the new look that I had. So people find their style, they really find better ways to express themselves other than just going yet again to a fast fashion retailer and buying a different color top to match or not match to other existing garments.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, and also that feeling of like, mixing and matching stuff that you have is like it is this uplifting feeling of like, oh, actually, this is what I really like, or this really suits me, rather than just like the mechanical thing of just going and buying something else because you think you've got nothing to wear because you're not really exploring your wardrobe.
Yeah, and we forget what's in the back drawer, what's in the I really like this advice that I think it's from one of Marie Kondo's books, where she says that in order to have a truly, inspiring wardrobe, you need to have 2 centimeters, like, okay, 2 fingers between the hangers. And it creates an airy feeling of your wardrobe. And I tried that and it really works. It really makes a whole difference in the wardrobe, like the whole spatial aesthetics, changes. It's not like crammed in there. It's all it's much more airy and much more pretty, I think.
Yeah, and also it's like looking after what you have.
Yeah.
You've spent money, which money is, you've earned money because of your time or whatever value you've given. And then we buy these clothes and then we shove them in our wardrobe. They're all cramped.
Yes.
It's like, what? Just doesn't make sense. Like, if we look after them, they're going to last longer, and then sell them or swap them.
And it's also about the value and worth, right? It's about, I'm so sorry, but I will have to put this guy up, otherwise he's not gonna.
Oh, it's the doggy.
Sorry. I feel that, sometimes when we see a garment on the shelf, on a hanger somewhere in the shop, it's just so pretty, and we feel, okay, I can spend this amount. It's an investment. But then when it's actually off the hanger, when it's in your bag and it arrives to your home, and then it's just shoved in the back of the closet, the whole allure, the whole mystique of mystery of the shop gets lost. And it's really like, why would you pay so much money? Why would you pay that? What did you pay for? It can still look amazing on you, but if you forget about it because of inadequate storage, if you forget about it or devalue it just by storing it in a cramped space, we don't see the value as much as we saw in a shop. Like the luxury shops, they hang stuff really far away from each other, right? So that it creates this idea of exclusivity and scarcity and limited access, limited collection, whatnot. So I really like this advice about treating your wardrobe as an exclusive club, and that not everybody gets in, and that you're really protective about the space. Once you have figured out how to keep those 2 centimeters between the hangers, like you really want to maintain it and triple check what to let in.
Yeah, I love that analogy, actually, like an exclusive club. It's like not anyone coming in. Yeah, that's wonderful. I love it. Katia, thank you so much for coming on. I've loved chatting to you. I could talk for hours about this subject. The Joyful Closet, you said it was coming out January, right?
Yes, but we already have a link to express your interest.
Okay,
so
great.
if that's something you'd like to do, I will share the link as a sign up, and around December you'll get a notification, a reminder that the challenge starts in January. It's very thoughtfully timed, because January is the time of sales and the time when many of us do I used to do silly things and buy on impulse quite a bit during sales, stuff that I regretted afterwards. So maybe this challenge is going to help you, try something else, try something new, a different approach to shopping or to experiencing fashion in January.
I love it. Thank you so much. And where can people find you online?
I speak a lot about fashion on LinkedIn. I don't know, I just found this platform very easy to work on. Also on Instagram, where I share as a side project. I have my own brand of underwear, sustainable and non-toxic underwear. That's been quite the journey. So on Instagram, I share mostly my the name of the brand, the well-rounded journey that I am on. But very happy to connect. And I realize that I have this kind of many people find it difficult to put me in a box, because my main job is I'm a researcher, but then I also speak a lot. And when I speak, I can't shut myself up because I have like an activist stand, and people tell me, why is it like you have to remain, impartial? I'm like, I can't remain partial when there's human suffering involved. Like, I really can't. I need to take a stand on certain things. So I have like this researcher hat and slightly activist hat. And then I also do this brand on the side. So I hope, these are just different facets of the of the personality.
Love it. Multi-dimensional.
Yes, that is. So happy to connect with everybody who's interested in these topics, for sure.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Katia.
Thanks, Lou.
You're welcome.
Bye.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please subscribe to the Lou Stokes podcast. Rate and review in the Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're tuning in from. I'd be so grateful. Also, check out the show notes to learn more about my guests and learn more about me on my website, www.loustokes.com. Until next time, be inspired, take action, and be the change you want to see in the world.